Maybe you haven't said it out loud, but you've probably felt that urge to disappear because you're tired of empty interactions, conversations that say nothing, a world that doesn't understand you. And when you try to explain, you're ignored, or they say it's just a phase, that you're isolating yourself too much and need to get out more. But the truth is that the loneliness you feel isn't solved by physical presence, because it doesn't come from the absence of others, but from the absence of real connection. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when you withdraw too far to protect yourself. We're going to explore the shadow of the solitary, the hidden side of those who break away from the world because they no longer know how to stay. Do you remember when it started? It probably wasn't a conscious decision to pull away from the world. It was more like a reflex, almost instinctive. One day you realized you were avoiding phone calls, canceling commitments, making excuses not to participate in social events. At first, it might have been relief. Finally, some peace, away from the constant demands, conversations that lead nowhere, people who seem to live on a completely different frequency than yours. You took a deep breath and thought, I need this space. But something subtle happened in this process. What began as a necessary pause was transforming into a wall. Each social experience that didn't meet your expectations became more proof that it was better to stay away. Each human disappointment became another brick in this invisible construction around you. And then, without realizing it, you were no longer choosing withdrawal. You were using it as protection. The armor that should have been temporary became permanent. The shield that should have protected your heart ended up isolating your soul. And now you wonder, when did I stop choosing solitude and start needing it? There's a very particular pain that few can name. It's the feeling of always being out of place, even when you're exactly where you should be. You look around and see people who seem to know exactly how this game of life works. What to say, how to react, when to laugh, how to connect. It's as if everyone received an instruction manual for social life, and yours got lost in the mail. You watch conversations flow naturally, see people creating bonds with no apparent effort, and wonder, what's wrong with me? Why does this seem so difficult? It's not that you can't interact. You can. But there's always this feeling of playing a role, following a script that wasn't made for you, like you speak the same language, but with an accent that no one can quite identify. Maybe you've spent your life trying to mold yourself to fit into different groups, relationships, environments, and each attempt at fitting in that didn't work left a mark. Every time you felt you weren't truly seen or understood, a part of you withdrew a little more. This exclusion isn't explicit. No one deliberately kicks you out. It's existential. It's the feeling that your essence finds no echo in the world around you. And when this repeats many times, it's natural that you begin to question whether the problem is with the world or with you. I don't need anyone. How many times have you said this phrase, whether to others or to yourself? It sounds strong, independent, almost heroic. And for a while, it might even be true. There's a sense of power in discovering that you can live well alone, that you don't depend on the approval or constant presence of other people. You develop self-sufficiency that impresses. You learn to be enough for yourself, to solve your problems, to find satisfaction in your own company and activities. And there's real value in this. Knowing how to be alone is an important skill, a form of emotional maturity. But there's a subtle line between healthy independence and defensive closure. And sometimes, without realizing it, this self-sufficiency becomes a mask for the fear of getting hurt again. Behind the discourse of not needing anyone might be a heart that's afraid to need and be disappointed. It's easier to say you chose solitude than to admit you might be afraid to try connecting again. It's more comfortable to see yourself as someone strong and independent than to recognize that part of this strength was born from the need to protect yourself from wounds that haven't completely healed. The real question isn't whether you can live without anyone. It's whether you're avoiding genuine connections out of fear of vulnerability. Because being truly strong sometimes means having the courage to lower your guard. There was a time when silence was your medicine. Those moments alone were like a balm for a soul tired of so much external noise. You found peace in your own company, could hear yourself, reconnect with yourself. It was nutritious, restorative silence. But something changed along the way. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, this same silence that once healed began to weigh heavy. The thoughts that once flowed creatively in the space of solitude now circle in loops. The internal dialogue that was enriching became repetitive, sometimes even torturous. You realize you're going entire days without meaningful conversations. That your ideas, reflections, discoveries get trapped inside you, without finding an echo in the external world. Like seeds planted in fertile soil but never seeing sunlight. They germinate, but don't grow completely. The tiredness you feel now is different from the one that made you seek isolation initially. Before, you were tired of the world. Now you're tired of carrying alone the weight of your own thoughts and feelings. It's the tiredness of not having anyone to share discoveries, doubts, moments of joy or sadness with. The silence that should be a space for renewal has transformed into an emotional desert. And you find yourself in a paradox. You need connection, but forgot how to create it. You want to share but lost the practice of opening up. Erich Fromm, one of the great thinkers about the human condition, observed something profound. We often flee from freedom because it demands responsibility and consciousness. And perhaps this is one of the most seductive illusions of withdrawal. The feeling that, being alone, you are completely free. Without needing to consider others' opinions, without negotiating desires, without adjusting schedules or commitments to other people. It seems you can finally be yourself without filters. There's an intoxicating sense of total autonomy, of being able to do exactly what you want, when you want, how you want. But is this real freedom? Or might it be that, by avoiding the complexities of human relationships, you're also avoiding the growth that's born precisely from this complexity? Wouldn't true freedom be the ability to consciously choose where to invest your energy and with whom to share your life? When you withdraw completely, you might be fleeing not just from people, but from the responsibility of learning to relate in a mature way. It's easier to avoid conflicts than to learn to resolve them. It's simpler not to get involved than to develop the ability to create healthy bonds. Real freedom requires presence in the world, not escape from it. It requires the courage to choose consciously, not the reflex to avoid out of fear. Maybe true freedom is learning to honor your depth without needing to completely reject shared humanity. There's a dangerous territory that many solitary people end up stepping into without realizing. The feeling of silent superiority. After observing the world from afar for a while, it's easy to start feeling like someone who sees beyond daily futilities, who's on a higher frequency than the masses. You look at superficial conversations, at concerns you consider small, at social dramas that seem empty, and think, I'm not like that. I'm deeper, more conscious, more awake. And maybe you are. Maybe your search for meaning and authenticity is genuine. But it's important to stop and ask yourself, is this feeling of being above really wisdom? Or is it a defense against the pain of never having been understood? Are you actually developing a more refined perception of life? Or creating a narrative that protects your ego from rejection? The line between discernment and arrogance is thinner than we'd like to admit. It's comforting to believe that our withdrawal is the conscious choice of someone evolved, and not the consequence of unprocessed wounds. It's easier to judge others as superficial than to recognize our own difficulty in creating intimacy. True depth isn't born from separation, but from the ability to find meaning even in the simplest interactions. Real wisdom isn't feeling superior to others, but recognizing shared humanity in all its complexity, including our own. Here's one of the most touching contradictions of the solitary soul. At the same time you withdraw, a secret part of you hopes someone will see through your distance and say, I understand you. It's as if you're testing the world, hiding to see who cares enough to look for you. You cancel plans, but secretly hope they'll insist. You pull away, but watch who notices your absence. You build walls, but leave small windows open, hoping someone will be sensitive enough to see through them. It's an unconscious and painful game of emotional hide-and-seek. Part of you wants to be seen, but only by those who can really see you. You don't want just any company. You want that rare connection that doesn't require explanations, that understands your silences, that accepts your intensity without trying to diminish or change you. It's a legitimate and human desire, but one that carries an impossible weight for any relationship. Because you expect others to guess what you can't express, to decode a code that maybe even you don't completely understand. This pattern creates a frustrating cycle. You withdraw hoping to be found, but when no one comes, or when they come in the wrong way, You use this as proof that it's really better to stay alone. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that confirms your suspicions about the superficiality of human connections. Maybe what you're really looking for isn't someone who finds you despite your withdrawal, but the courage to show yourself in a way that you can be genuinely found. Remember Plato's allegory of the cave? Sometimes withdrawal begins as a comfortable cave, a safe place where you can rest from the blinding lights of the external world. The shadows on the wall are predictable, familiar, controllable. You know every corner of this internal space. But something strange happens when you stay too long in any place, even a place you chose. It stops being a refuge and becomes the only world you know. The muscles of socialization begin to atrophy. The ability to deal with human unpredictability diminishes. The world out there begins to seem not just hostile, but strange. You realize that small social interactions that were once automatic now require effort. A casual conversation at the store becomes a challenge. An unexpected phone call awakens anxiety. You find yourself avoiding situations you once did without thinking, not by choice, but by discomfort. The routine of withdrawal crystallizes. You develop avoidance rituals so elaborate that you don't even notice when you're running from something anymore. Waking up late to avoid neighbors, shopping at alternative hours, choosing paths that reduce casual encounters. What began as a conscious choice to prioritize your inner peace now looks more like a conditioned reflex. The cave that offered protection has become an invisible prison, and the key is in your hand, but you've almost forgotten how to use it. The fear of trying and no longer being able to connect paralyzes any movement toward the exit. There's a subtle transformation that can happen when you spend too much time observing the world from afar. Contemplative calm can slowly give way to growing irritation. It's almost imperceptible at first, like emotional erosion that happens drop by drop. First, it's the banal conversations that start bothering you more than normal. Those chats about the weather, about celebrities, about daily trivialities that you once just ignored, now provoke internal impatience. How can people waste time with this, you think? Then, it's the noise. Voices in the hallway, loud music from neighbors, laughter that seems too forced. Everything starts sounding like invasion. Your tolerance threshold for social stimuli decreases drastically. What was once just a preference for silence now becomes almost an aversion to the sound of human coexistence. Gradually, small irritations accumulate. The way people talk loudly on the phone, the superficiality of social media, the perceived falseness in social smiles, everyone's constant rush. Each observation feeds an internal narrative that you really are different, and not in a good way. Bitterness begins to replace serenity. Where there was once a peaceful choice for solitude, now there's growing disdain for humanity. You catch yourself judging behaviors you once just observed. The distancing that should bring peace is generating constant and silent criticism of the world around you. It's an important warning sign. When chosen solitude transforms into reactive misanthropy, maybe it's time to question whether you're still choosing consciously or just reacting to unresolved wounds. Marie-Louise von Franz, Carl Jung's disciple and great student of the unconscious, made an observation that cuts like a blade. The danger of the inner journey is confusing the internal realm with the final destination, and not with a stage of transformation. In other words, you can get lost in your own depth. When you spend too much time immersed in your own psyche, without the mirror of external relationships to help you calibrate your perception, something dangerous can happen. You can begin to identify with your darker aspects. The introspection that should lead to self-knowledge becomes a labyrinth where you get lost. Those critical thoughts about others become your predominant internal voice. That feeling of not belonging crystallizes into fixed identity. That pain of not being understood transforms into the belief that you are intrinsically incomprehensible. And worse, you begin to like this narrative. It's seductive to become the tragic hero of your own story. The one who's too deep to be understood, too sensitive for the brutal world, too evolved for superficial relationships. This identification with the shadow of the misunderstood can become addictive because it offers a noble explanation for pain. But Jung warned about this. When you don't return from the inner journey, when you don't integrate your internal discoveries with external life, you risk becoming possessed by your own unconscious contents. The shadow you should know and integrate ends up dominating you. The inner dive is essential. but it should be a means, not an end. True individuation happens when you can bring the treasures of depth back to the surface of shared life. When you stay too long alone with your own thoughts, something curious happens to your perception of the external world. It begins to distort like a broken mirror. Each social interaction becomes proof that confirms your pre-existing suspicions about people. Someone doesn't respond to a message quickly, obviously they don't care about you. A conversation stays superficial, clearly the person is empty. A social encounter doesn't flow naturally. You definitely don't belong anywhere. Each small experience becomes evidence that reinforces your narrative of isolation. It's confirmation bias in action. Your mind, already predisposed to find proof that withdrawal is justified, filters reality to highlight only aspects that confirm this belief. You stop noticing gestures of affection, signs of genuine interest, moments of real connection, or minimize them as exceptions that confirm the rule. Gradually, your ability to read social nuances deteriorates. You forget that people also have their own complexities, fears, bad days, different ways of showing affection. You begin to interpret neutrality as rejection, distraction as disinterest, difference as incompatibility. The most dangerous thing is that this perceptual distortion feeds on itself. The more you see the world through this fragmented lens, the more the world seems to confirm you were right to withdraw. It's a vicious cycle where altered perception generates behaviors that provoke exactly the responses you expected to receive. Breaking this distorted mirror requires brutal honesty with yourself. Are people really all problematic, or are you only seeing what you expect to see? There's a dangerous moment in the withdrawal journey when solitude stops being a circumstantial choice and becomes a rigid life philosophy. It's when you build an entire belief system around your experience of isolation, transforming personal preferences into absolute truths about human nature. People are superficial. Relationships are always disappointing. The world is futile and empty. I'm better this way. These phrases stop being temporary observations and become unquestionable dogmas. You begin to defend your solitude as if it were a religion, attacking any suggestion that perhaps there's value in human connections. What began as a need for space crystallizes into a fixed identity. You become the person who doesn't need anyone, the loner, the one who sees beyond social illusions. And the more you identify with these labels, the harder it becomes to abandon them, even when they begin to limit you. The original pain that led you to withdrawal transforms into identity itself. You begin to have an emotional investment in continuing to suffer in this specific way, because change would mean abandoning a narrative that gives meaning to your life experience. It's terrifying to think about who you would be without this story. When solitude becomes ideology, you stop questioning whether it's still serving your growth. You stop evaluating whether the beliefs that protected you in the past are still useful in the present. And mainly, you stop allowing yourself the possibility that maybe you could be happy in a different way. The danger isn't in solitude itself, but in the rigidity of making it the only possible way to exist. If you've made it this far in this reflection, you might be wondering, and now? If I recognize these patterns in myself, does this mean I need to force myself to be social again? The answer is more subtle and gentle than that. Reconnection isn't about betraying who you've become. It's about expanding who you can be. Going back to opening yourself to the world doesn't mean abandoning your depth or accepting superficiality. It doesn't mean forcing yourself into situations that genuinely don't nourish you or pretending enthusiasm for things that don't interest you. It means something much more sophisticated, learning to discern where and how your presence can find authentic echo. Maybe reconnection is about quality, not quantity. Maybe it's about finding one or two people who can truly see you, instead of trying to fit into large groups. Maybe it's about sharing your internal discoveries selectively, but genuinely. The courage here isn't in mixing with everyone, but in being available for meaningful connections when they appear. It's having the vulnerability to lower your guard with those who deserve it. It's consciously choosing where to place your trust, instead of closing it to everyone out of fear. Reconnection can also mean contributing to the world in ways that honor your nature, maybe through art, writing, work, small gestures of compassion. It's not about becoming a different person, but about allowing your essence to find expression in the shared world. Emotional maturity isn't having overcome the need for solitude. It's knowing how to consciously navigate between moments of withdrawal and moments of sharing, without rigidly identifying with either extreme. And so we arrive at the most delicate point of this entire journey. the subtle art of living between worlds. It's not about choosing between absolute solitude or constant exposure. It's about developing the wisdom to consciously transit between different ways of being in the world. You don't need to give up your depth to belong somewhere. You don't need to diminish yourself to be accepted, nor isolate yourself completely to preserve yourself. There's a middle path that honors both your need for introspection and your essentially human and social nature. The invisible balance is in being selective without being hostile, in being free without being isolated, in being deep without being exclusionary. It's about recognizing that your sensitivity can be a gift to the world, not a curse that separates you from it forever. Maybe you'll discover that there are people who don't just tolerate your intensity, but celebrate it. That there are spaces in the world where your particular way of seeing and feeling is not just accepted, but necessary. That your journey of withdrawal gave you gifts that only you can offer. True freedom is in being able to choose consciously. Choose when to withdraw and when to show yourself. Choose with whom to share your depth and when to keep your silence. Choose to be in the world without being of the world, or be of the world without losing yourself in it. You can be deep and still human. You can be selective and still loving. You can honor your need for space and still contribute to the beauty of shared existence. The secret is in not identifying with any extreme, but in consciously dancing between them. If you recognize yourself in these reflections, know that you're not alone in this very human experience of questioning how and where to belong in the world. Your sensitivity, your depth, your need for authenticity, all of this has value and place in the complex fabric of existence. To deepen this understanding of yourself even further and find tools to navigate this journey with more consciousness, I invite you to discover our exclusive ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes, which is in the first pinned comment. If this content helped you in any way, leave your like so more people can find these reflections. Subscribe to the channel and stay with me for the next video.